to and looking at today. I almost want to say, I don't know if people are familiar with the phrase a trigger warning. Like before you share something that's really difficult, you say this might trigger something for our readers or for our listeners. So people sometimes will say that if they're about to write about something horrific like abuse or something like that, trigger warning. So this is a trigger warning for, you know, uh, anyone who's had a loss, because that's not to say you shouldn't stay and listen, but know that that's the topic of today, because in the musical Hamilton, um, Alexander and Eliza's son dies tragically, and this is the song about their grieving, about their mourning process. I actually find it very healing. I find it does a really good job of taking us through their grief toward a place of where the song will end is forgiveness. It's just beautiful. I've listened to it so many times that I can finally hear it without like sobbing. Although the other day I was playing, my husband Avi bought me the piano book, the Hamilton piano book, and I was playing, and of course I got to, and I don't play that well, but I was kind of clunking through it, and I got to this song, and I was like playing and weeping and playing and weeping. It really it hits you in the heart. So I say that just to know what we're in store for, and the text we're going to be comparing it to, the Torah text, is also a text of someone mourning a child. You know, we don't compare grief, we don't compare losses, but obviously the loss of a child is just, well, unimaginable. That's the word. That's the word that will come back again and again in this song. Unimaginable. They're dealing with the unimaginable. So in many ways, this song is about loss, but it's also about the relationship between Alexander and Eliza. And I want to take us back to where we were in our last class. We looked at the song that would be enough when Alexander learns that Eliza is pregnant, is expecting their son Philip. And what's happened since is quite a drama. So Philip is grown. Alexander, we don't know the exact chronology here in the musical, but Alexander, at some point while the kids are younger, Alexander cheats on his wife. Eliza is off with Angelica and with the family on a vacation in the country, and he sleeps with this woman, and then eventually publishes it. We talked about that last time also. Publishes the Reynolds pamphlet, making public the fact that he cheated on his wife with a married woman. And there's a song that we're not going to have time to look at in our time together, but the really heart-wrenching, icy song called Burn, where Eliza is singing to Alexander, burning the letters that he had written her, burning when she finds out about this adultery, this unfaithfulness. And she said that song actually she ends with like, I hope you burn, you know, and she says, I'm taking myself out of the narrative. I don't want them to read about me. How did Eliza feel when she learned that Alexander was unfaithful? So their relationship has been through a really rough time. Eliza has said in that song, Eliza said, you forfeit your place in our bed. You'll sleep in your office instead. I mean, it's everything that a wife would and should say, right, when she's been cheated on. Where we arrive now is after the tragedy. The son, Philip, the eldest, right, that we had heard they were expecting, the son is grown up. The son is, well, a stupid teenager and challenges someone to a duel and gets himself in trouble and gets himself shot and killed. So it's Quiet Uptown is about the silence of their mourning, of their grief. Before we listen to that, I actually I want to show the brilliance of the musical and of the writing. I want to show just a minute or less of the previous song that we had listened to last week. That would be enough, and you'll hear then echoes of this song in today's song. So listen for a moment. It's Quiet Uptown. Sorry, that would be enough. Getting ahead of myself. You'll hear Eliza encouraging Alexander. I don't care that I'm a poor man's wife. Just stay alive. That would be enough. You hear him being consoled by her. Here we go.
Being your wife. Look around, look around. Look at where you are. Look at where you started. The fact that you're alive is a miracle. Just stay alive, that would be enough. And if this child shares a fraction of your smile, or a fragment of your mind, look outward, that would be enough.
Okay, so she's pregnant, right? She's pregnant with Philip, and that would be enough is exactly what we're going to hear in the midst of this song that's coming up now when Philip has tragically passed away. Just going to pull up It's Quiet Uptown. This one, actually, I did not find publicly available a video version of it. So what we're watching is the lyrics coming through the screen as the song is playing. The theme of the quiet is very, very present. This is just, like I said, just after Philip was shot and died. And the quiet that you hear is the fact that Eliza is actually on the stage, but doesn't sing or say a word until the very, very end of the song. So the quiet is the quiet of a mother grieving for her child. And then, of course, you'll hear the look around will come back. So fasten your safety belts for It's Quiet Uptown.
There are moments that the words don't reach. There is suffering too terrible to name. You hold your child as tight as you can and push away the unimaginable. The moments when you're in so deep, it feels easier to just swim down. The Hamiltons move uptown and learn to live with the unimaginable.
I spend hours in the garden. I walk alone to the store, and it's quiet uptown. I never liked the quiet before. I take the children to church on Sunday, a sign of the cross at the door, and I pray. That never used to happen before.
If you see him in the street, walking by himself, talking to himself, have pity.
Philip, you would like it uptown. It's quiet uptown.
He is working through the unimaginable.
His hair is gone gray. He passes every day. They say he walks the length of the city.
You knock me out, I fall apart.
Can you imagine?
Look at where we are. Look at where we started. I know I don't deserve you, Eliza, but hear me out, that would be enough. If I could spare his life, if I could trade his life for mine, he'd be standing here right now, and you would smile, and that would be enough. I don't pretend to know the challenges we're facing. I know there's no replacing what we've lost, and you need time, but I'm not afraid. I know who I married. Just let me stay here by your side.
him in the street, walking by her side, talking by her side, have pity.
Eliza, do you like it uptown? It's quiet uptown.
He is trying to do the unimaginable. See them walking in the park, long after dark, taking in the sights of the city.
Look around, Eliza.
They are trying to do the unimaginable.
There are moments that the words don't reach. There's a grace too powerful to name. We push away what we can never understand. We push away the unimaginable. They are standing in the garden, Alexander by Eliza's side. She takes his hand. It's quiet uptown.
Forgiveness. Can you imagine? Forgiveness. Can you imagine? If you see him in the street, walking by her side, talking by her side, have pity. They are going through the unimaginable.
So let's appreciate the journey that this song takes us on. I'm going to share the lyrics. And in our text study, we're really going to focus on the silence, right? The quiet. But in this song, it's what the silence makes possible. First of all, I guess I didn't mention this before, but it's not Eliza or Alexander who sing or who start the singing. It's Angelica. She's narrating what's going on because the words can't reach, right? Their suffering is too terrible to name. There's so much beauty and truth and sadness in this song, right? We hold our children as tight as we can, and we try not to think of what might happen to them, the next time they cross the street, God forbid. I mean, it's just the mindset of a parent, right? It drives you crazy. But it starts with I, right? Hamilton is I walk alone, and I take the children to church, and I pray, right? In that space of the silence, he begins to have some sort of awakening, a spiritual awakening. And he's walking and talking to himself and talking to his imagined son, to Philip. The time has made him old. The suffering has made him old. And so it starts with this I of Alexander, and then it moves. I'm going to the top of the next column here. It moves to him actually speaking to Eliza. This is where he's singing an echo of her song to him that I just played, right? I look at where we are, look at where we started. Just hear me out. That would be enough. And he goes to the same tune as where she said, I don't pretend to know the challenges you're facing, right? The worlds you keep erasing and creating in your minds. That was back when, he was doing his big work. And he says to her now, I don't pretend to know, like to understand this. And there's no replacing what we've lost, and you need time. But he says to her, just like she had said to him, I'm not afraid. I know who I married. Just let me stay here by your side. And then he's walking in the street talking to her. He is trying to do the unimaginable. So before, the unimaginable was the unimaginable loss. Now the unimaginable is to ask for forgiveness from the wife that you betrayed. And now it's not him walking and taking in the city, but it's them, right? See them walking in the park. They're still not speaking. He's speaking to her, and it moves us through this unimaginable to what Angelica now says is the grace too powerful to name. How beautiful is that switch that the lyrics made, right? Before it was the suffering that was too terrible to name. And now they've moved through the silence and through the respect of Alexander, giving Eliza the space and the time and the standing with her, but not expecting anything of her, now there is grace. Now Alexander is standing by her side and she takes his hand and she actually speaks. And all she says in the entire song is this line, it's quiet uptown. And that's when then the company sort of comment on this moment, forgiveness. Can you imagine? Like that forgiveness is unimaginable. But at least in their suffering, they're going through it together, right? At the end, they are going through the unimaginable. They're talking side by side, and it won't bring back their son, but it will at least make the suffering a little more bearable. And perhaps it's the silence, it's the quiet uptown that makes that sort of forgiveness and companionship possible. So we're going to move to our text. I mean, isn't that just a remarkable piece of art? We're going to move to our text. And the text, as I said, is also, this is a heavy one, my friends. We've come a far way from those songs of the parties and the weddings and so on. And it's Quiet Uptown is the sons of Aaron who passed away in the parsha we read not too long ago, Parshat Shmini. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the theology here of why they died. We'll read the narrative, and I'm more interested for now in the response of Aaron, whose response is, of course, is silence, hence the connection with It's Quiet Uptown, and the way that also shows up in the Jewish laws of mourning, the importance of silence in grieving. So Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, take the center stage here. The context in the story is that this is a day of celebration. So this is the day of the inauguration of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the inauguration of the priests of their new job. It's sort of their first day on the new job as priests, and they've been given a whole host of guidelines. And for whatever reason, Nadav and Avihu violate these guidelines for the Kohanim, for the priests. They sort of betray their role of leadership. And the commentaries sort of have a field day trying to understand what exactly they did wrong. What was their sin? Because text is a little bit vague. The text says, so we'll read it together now, Vayikru b'nei Aharon, Nadav va'Avihu, ish machtato. So each son of Aaron, by the way, Aaron had 4 sons. So this is 2 of the 4 sons, the older 2. Take a fire pan, put fire, vayitznu bahen eish, probably meaning coals, right? Vayasnu aleha ketoret, and put the incense on the coals. This is the procedure for burning incense. Vayakrivu lifnei Hashem, they brought before God eish zara, a strange fire or an alien fire or an offering that was not asked for in the way that they brought it, asher lo tziva otam, that God had not commanded them. Whatever they did was wrong. I'll just give you an example of, one opinion says that what they did wrong was that they showed up drunk to the holiest space in the holiest day of, well, it wasn't Yom Kippur, but it was the first day. And the reason the commentary, this particular opinion says that it was the problem was that they showed up drunk, is that after this whole ordeal, God says some other instructions to the Kohanim, the first of which is don't be drunk when you complete your service. So that's one theory. Another theory is the procedure through which they brought the ketoret, the incense, was incorrect. Whatever it is, they made a grave mistake, and maybe also we're holding them to a high standard of leadership. And God, as punishment in verse 2, instantly kills them. This fire of God, which would usually be the fire of God consuming the sacrifices, right? This fire of God comes and consumes these 2 young men. Vayamutu, they die on the spot, lifnei Hashem, before the Lord. I mean, it's not quite, the Hamilton story is this duel. And I don't want to draw a direct parallel, but the son Philip is a zealot. He talks up and he talks out, and don't you talk against. I don't remember actually even the exact storyline now. Don't talk against my father. Like I'm Alexander. I'm a Hamilton. You don't talk to me that way. Whatever it was, he thought he was doing good, and then he goes to his dad, and his dad says, "Just shoot in the air," and he does that. And of course, he's foolish and he's idealistic, and he gets killed. So he's not a bad kid, and they too. It seemed they really make a grave error. And now Moses breaks the news to Aaron, verse 3. And it's possible that this is Moses breaking the news, or it's possible that this is Moses trying to make sense of it or explain it, or maybe even comfort Aaron. Verse 3, Vayomer Moshe el Aharon, Hu asher diber Hashem lemor. This is what God meant when God said, Bikrovai akadesh. I become holy, God says, through those who are close to me. And I gain glory, kavod, through the people. So again, this is not really where I want to focus the class, but there's some sort of explanation happening here. They were extra holy, or they were extra pure, or they were extra close to God, or God wanted them close to him, so God took them. I think of this almost the way people show up at the Shiva and say, maybe he was better off that way. I mean, these terrible things that people say, right? He was suffering. They mean well. Maybe they mean to comfort the mourner, or, only the good die young is some sort of version of this. And Moses is almost sermonizing. That's how I imagine it. And Aaron's response is so telling. Vayidom Aharon, Aaron was silent. Aaron has no response. It's quiet uptown in the wilderness. Okay, it's quiet. And then Moses is left to sort of take care of what has to happen next. So he calls Mishael and Elzaphan. So these are cousins, essentially other Kohanim, or other Levites, not Kohanim, and says, take care of the bodies in a respectful manner and carry them out of the camp, and so on and so forth. Vayidom Aharon, and Aaron was silent. Excuse me. So we're going to look at this silence, and I'm going to show you the ways that I think fundamentally many of the commentaries are uncomfortable with this silence. The silence doesn't tell us much. Was the silence a silence of acceptance? Was the silence a silence of upset, of, you're so overwhelmed by grief that there is nothing you can say? And yes, thank you, David, for the comment about a contrast with the mourning of David and others as well, who sort of cry out. I'm just going to ask everyone to make sure you stay on mute, because sometimes there is background noise. And Rachel, I know you're here. Rachel Feldman, a shout out to Rachel, who takes care of the back end of these classes. You can also make sure that the muting stays so that we can all hear. Thank you. So yes, it's a deeper silence, and it's not to say that everyone who mourns is silent. Some people cope with a lot of talking. That's okay too. What I want to show you, I know it's going to be blurry for a second while I move, is that the commentaries have different ways of understanding what this silence was. And the reason I say the commentaries have to explain it or cope with it, or maybe are uncomfortable with it on some level, it's nothing bad about the commentaries. It's because look at what they say. So the Ramban, Nachmanides, says this means that he cried out loud and then became silent. The Ramban actually makes this text almost mean its opposite. And it actually, it's not unfounded. Vayidom Aharon means he became silent. So Shahaya boche bekol, he first cried out loud, ve'az shatak, and then silenced himself. And the Ramban takes another citation to show another a place from Eicha, from the Book of Lamentations, which is a book of mourning that shows, we're crying out loud and then we are silent. The Seforno, another classic commentator, says that Vayidom Aharon, Aaron's silence, is about his feeling comforted, that he didn't cry out, because in response to what Moses said, that it represented a sanctification of the name of God, that it was, Bikrovaya Kadesh, that they were so sanctified that God needed them closer, or perhaps they died as a lesson for the other priests what not to do, how to protect yourself. Whatever it was, seemed to have satisfied Aaron in this reading. And yes, feel free to keep putting into the chat your own theories of what this silence meant. And I'll show you just one final commentary. This is Rashi, and Rashi is not making it up. Again, Rashi almost always brings a midrash. Rashi is citing the midrash that says the fact that he was silent means that he accepted God's judgment. He accepted this, and what's more, he received a reward from God for this silence. Kibel sachar al shtikato. And what was the reward? Uma sachar kibel, that he merited for more of God's revelation coming just to him and not to Moses. Shenityached imo hadibur. The divine God addressed only him, not with Moses, with the next section, which deals with, as I said, instructions to the Kohanim about not being intoxicated by wine. I mean no disrespect to the great Rashi, and I understand this is an explanation that may be comforting for some, like we should accept God's judgment. However, for me, it's really hard. If you just accept, you'll be rewarded. Okay, so this was Rashi. We're gonna switch gears to say that the feature of silence, it plays a very important role in Jewish mourning practice. And thank you. Actually, I want to pause before we get here because I see a couple of other comments in the chat, and I'll just read them aloud in case some people can't read them. Some other comments about what Aaron's silence might mean. So Elaine is saying maybe Aaron is silent because what Moshe says isn't of comfort to him. And this is, yes, along the lines of what I was saying before. People at a shiva sometimes say something that they think is of comfort when just sitting and saying nothing, because no words can be the right words, is what is best to do. So Aaron is silent. David's silence could have been white anger. Oof, right. Yes. I mean, the silence speaks volumes, but then it leaves for us and the many commentaries before us to theorize what the silence might have meant. So the silence for some of us is, his disagreement or his anger. For others, maybe his acquiescence. Shock. Thank you, Esther. Anita is adding another dimension here as well. There's some commentary that says with Aaron being a public figure and to keep up a public face, even in his grief. He's the high priest and can't behave in other ways like normal people. And this is one more way. We do continue to have different standards for public figures. Yes, and I should mention that what unfolds next in the text, which we didn't look at, is where Moses then says to Aaron and the other two sons, do not grieve, do not go into mourning, continue your role. And I do see that, and many see that as a way of saying you can't behave like normal people. You need to show that you maybe accept this, or maybe just, we can't make the avodah, the service of God, the service in the Mishkan, put on hold for this. So it is kind of get up and go back to work, which we would never expect of anybody else. I actually had this conversation with a lay leader, someone in our community who had a loss and who felt very troubled by this reaction in the text and said, I'm the head of a company, and I actually want to model for my employees that they should take time off if they have a loss. And so if I lost a loved one and didn't take a week off of work to sit Shiva, then that doesn't give permission to everybody else to do the same. So I think that was a very sensitive way for a leader to understand his or her place, and to understand that maybe for that leader, the right thing was to take time off. And I think modern leaders, would most, I hope, agree. Although there is a story of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the day after her husband died, showing up on the bench. And for her, she said, Marty would have wanted it this way. This is my way of honoring his memory. So, there's no cookie cutter approach to grief, and I certainly respect that decision as well. And in our modern day, yes, thank you for the comment that's coming in privately to me in the chat. Yes, in modern day, Kohanim sit Shiva, Kohanim, priests, people of priestly descent, do all of the mourning practices, and especially Kohanim who don't usually go into a cemetery or to a funeral home, do enter a cemetery and a funeral for their immediate relatives, for their own loss. So it is a statement of, this is where you put your public role on hold to be a private mourner. The implication here is that maybe Aharon, who was not a Kohen, but a Kohen Gadol, maybe Aharon was a high priest, those normal rules maybe wouldn't have applied to him. Yes, thank you, Paula. Sheryl Sandberg's public and gracious mourning was a model for others. When she lost her husband very suddenly. Mourning is personal, and then people can make a choice whether they want to make it public. Baruch Dayan ha'emet, right, beyond any own emotional reaction. So thank you for all the good machloket, the good debates, and disagreements in the chat. I'm bringing for you now a couple of sources about mourning practices. So this is from the tractate called Moed Katan. This is from the Talmud, encouraging us to not speak. And it even uses this halachic terminology. I don't know how comfortable everyone is in reading this, are not permitted to speak words of consolation. But that's the English translation is are not permitted. It means in the Hebrew, it's ein menachamin rasha'in. They aren't given permission to or aren't allowed to lomar davar, to say anything ad sheyiftach avel, until the mourner starts the conversation. So this is the custom that is very, very hard for many of us to keep, that when you walk into a Shiva house, you can walk in, you sort of nod, you sit down, and you start to listen. I think we can take a little bit of license in the way that we are silent. In other words, some people have a hard time not even just saying, hi, how are you? Or hi, it's sorry for your loss. I think that kind of the how are you, I wouldn't even say, but I'm sorry for your loss is okay. But the message here is you don't set the agenda as the Shiva visitor. You wait and listen and see what the mourner needs. And it's much easier said than done, especially in the pre-COVID days of busy Shiva houses and people in and out, and it almost feels like a cocktail party and you walk in. It's really important to remember to give the mourner the space and the time. And I think that the Hamilton song shows that really beautifully. The song opens with Angelica holding a space for the silence of Eliza in her grief. And then Hamilton starts by also just in his own space and then walking over and just standing next to Eliza and saying, I don't expect anything. The model here in this text is the model of the person who suffered the ultimate losses, the character of Job. So the source here that the Talmud is citing, Shene Emar, as it is stated, the English, I'll just remind those who are looking at this kind of translation for the first time, the bold words in the English are the actual words that are appearing in the Hebrew. The unbolded words are the work of the translator helping us out. So the translator fills in the rest of the verse, even though the Talmud text only quotes a few words at the end. So you can see in the English, as it is stated, and they sat down with him upon the ground for 7 days and 7 nights, and none spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. After this, acharei chen, patach Iyov et pihu. After this, Job opened his mouth. And afterwards, then it says, Vaya'an Eliphaz haTemani. His friends come. His friends are silent. Job begins to speak, and afterwards the friends respond. And that is used as the model for a proper for Shiva. These days with Shivas happening by phone or by Zoom, you pick up the phone and you call someone, and I think that's much better than waiting for the mourner to call you. It's really hard sometimes to reach out, and the way that I think you see the rest of the company sort of standing back and not getting into Eliza and Hamilton's space, like just watching them walking and walking. I think that's very real. And I think that sometimes that can be very damaging because people are afraid to approach someone because it's so unimaginable. They're working through the unimaginable. Give them the time, give them the space. Yes, but don't hold back from reaching out. Don't let the silence be a barrier to someone feeling that support of community. So it's a very delicate balance. This is another text from the tractate of Moed Katan. The first 3 days of mourning are considered more intense. The sages taught, Avel shlosha yamim harishonim astur b'she'elat shalom. The mourner should not extend greetings to others in the first 3 days. Shouldn't say hello, just be. Or I'll just add, shouldn't be expected to say hello. Sometimes I'm in a Shiva and someone says, oh, thank you. It's so nice of you to come. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say that. Okay, don't beat yourself up. Just say whatever comes. But you shouldn't expect a mourner to speak. And the mourner shouldn't expect himself or herself to extend normal pleasantries. Just let yourself off the hook. And then from the 3rd to the 7th day, if someone does extend greetings, the mourner can respond, but shouldn't extend. In other words, you could respond to someone so as not to make them feel bad or awkward, but still you as mourner, don't reach out or don't have to extend. And then after the Shiva, from this point forward, he may extend greetings and respond as usual. And I'm just going to show you where that is manifest. This is a little mini text, just in the house of mourning, silence is optimal. So another excerpt from the Talmud demonstrating this idea. Just bear with the blurry as I scroll down. So this idea of a mourner extending greetings, not extending greetings, responding to greetings. I'm just showing you, I don't usually do this, but I'm showing you the way that in the Shulchan Aruch, that's the text of the Code of Jewish Law in the 1500s, does sort of codify this, which is often the case, right? A conversation that's earlier in the Talmud, right? In the 4th, 5th, 6th centuries, becomes codified into law over the years later. So this is then 1,000 years later, this text is sort of the end of this whole process of evolving law. And you can see, it's laid out very detailed. There's a quote from the book of Ezekiel about the silence also of mourners. And the first 3 days, which are designated for weeping, he does not extend a greeting of peace. She'elat shalom in the Hebrew. Lish'ol shalom is to ask someone's well-being, welfare. If others are unaware that he's a mourner and extend him a greeting of peace, he should not respond to them, but should inform them that he is a mourner. So it gives a little more detail. What do you do if you're a mourner and someone says, hi, nice to see you, how are you? Your response is, I'm in mourning. You don't have to put on a show and answer. Bear with me for a moment. And then after the 3 to 7 days, he does not extend the greeting. But if someone is unaware and extends to him the greeting of peace, he can respond to them out of respect. And then after the Shiva, until 30 days, he extends a greeting of peace, but others don't extend to him a greeting of peace. Like, still remember this person is in Shloshim, and don't just say, hey, how you doing, as if nothing is going on, if you're aware that they are in mourning. And I'll just mention, at the end here, we're not going to read every word, but at the end, after the 30 days, this is regarded as all other people. In other words, the period of mourning lasts for 30 days. There's a caveat here that applies only to family members that are not one's parent. But of course, as we know, for one's parent, father or mother, you're in a period of mourning for a full year, right? That's the full year of Kaddish, 12 months. Now, in practice in our communities, we know that, we don't really refrain from saying hello to someone for the year. Again, I think what this is keep it at the front of mind when you see someone or when you greet someone, to not greet them in the normal manner if they're within a year of having lost a parent. The end here, this is the gloss of the Ramah, another commentator on the Shulchan Aruch, saying, just don't indulge in much conversation. Don't indulge as if it's normal. There's one last thing I wanted to show you, and this is really, I don't know if I should say trigger warning on this, as I said at the beginning, but our nation suffered a loss, just this past week in the city of Meron in Israel. And there have been many who were mourning the loss of a child. And in some cases, it was siblings who died both together. Really a tragedy. And almost immediately, along with the mourning and the sadness, of these 45 families, it was less than 45 families, because as I said, there were some siblings, but 45 victims who died in this accident in Meron on Lag BaOmer night. There were immediately sort of theories about why did it happen? How did it happen? Who is to blame? The floor was too slippery. The exits were not clear. It was too many people. The police didn't monitor appropriately. The Haredi community didn't allow the police. They wanted to, back and forth. And obviously people are trying to explain, and there needs to be an investigation. But there was a beautiful poem that I'll share with you. And I saw it sort of going around the internet. And actually Rabbi Shire shared it this Shabbat for our, of course, less than 25 people who are allowed to gather in person on Shabbat morning. And it was written by Rabbi Lior Engelman. And here's the poem. I'm going to read it in the Hebrew and translate it as I go, but you can see it also in front of us. It's called Mi Ashem, who is guilty. Kishehahar be'evlo odenu ashen. And the mountain in mourning is still smoking. V'na'ar ramus bekoshi noshem, a trampled boy or child can barely breathe. This translation, by the way, is Rabbi Shire's translation. V'yeled domem beli zehut bli shem, a still boy or a silent boy. Domem is the same word from Vayidom Aharon, silent, who's not yet identified, right? Because so many of these young men, we didn't know who they were for quite some time. At this time, Al tish'alu, do not ask, mi Ashem, who is guilty. Achshav zman shtika lema'an Hashem. For God's sake, for God's name, this is the time for silence. And I saw a little snippet from an Israeli news program where Lior Engelman was speaking, Rabbi Lior Engelman. He said it was like the moment of Vayidom Aharon. He quoted our verse of Aaron in the face of terrible loss of his two children, just silent. He said, now is the time for silence. Later will be the time for investigations. Later will be the time for speaking. But right now is silence. I saw another colleague write about this. She wrote, we are now in a state still of what's called an aninut, onain. The onain is the person before the shiva, right? The person in shock who is not even yet a mourner, but is not supposed to be doing any mitzvot and is really in limbo, right? This is the time when he wrote this immediately in the wake of the tragedy. This is the time for silence, and it's quiet, right? It's respecting the quiet, and it's respecting the emotions that are present, whatever those may be. And so I felt, that this was the week to bring us It's Quiet Uptown. And this was the week to bring us Vayidom Aharon, and the acknowledgement that so many are in mourning, and that our nation came together in unity in mourning is a respect for just the unimaginable. And I know I speak to a lot of people in mourning, and And again, there's no comparing. There's respecting what that process is for that person in that moment. And I think that, that's what I hear in the word unimaginable. I cannot imagine your pain. That's not fair to you. And I think the other side of the unimaginable is where it makes people recoil, like pull back and not reach out. So here we are. And I want to respect the silence in the Zoom room. And at the same time, encourage anyone, you don't have to participate personally. It's more about, speaking to what you see in the musical, what you see in that music, in bringing back the song that had to do with their relationship, the healing, the forgiveness that was possible because of it. And the process of, Aaron's silence being an impetus for our mourning, our silence practices, even today and even this very week. Thank you, Elaine. Yeah, there's a lot to be said. I'd rather not speak to the politics right now of, what many have said is the autonomous communities that sort of make their own rules, and the role of government and law enforcement. What we're saying here is there will be time. There will be time for that. David, comments, questions, considerations, please.
Yes. Fortunately, this hasn't affected anybody I know, but I would like to know the protocol for a Shiva visit by telephone, because you're speaking.
Yes.
Can you explain that? How does
Yes.
this work?
Yes, thank you for saying that. What I've seen over this year, more than a year now, is that different families deal with loss during the pandemic in different ways. And some families feel very strongly that they don't want to bring any technology in at all. So they don't want to have a Zoom access to the funeral service, for example. They don't want to put out a link on the Paperman's website. If we're only allowed to have up to 25 people in the cemetery for a graveside service, then that's what it is. And later, when the world opens up, we'll do, an unveiling and invite everyone that we feel would have been there. So I've seen that happen as well with Shivas. And we honor that and we respect that. People want just their bubble, so to speak, right? Just their pod of their household that's allowed to be together. That's their Shiva. And I remember just recently speaking to a family who said that was really wonderful for them because they were able to have what they called quality family time without interruptions, extensive interruptions. I'll move from that to the phone.
Yeah.
So then some people understand that Shiva is meant to be a time to not be in isolation, and they want people to reach out, and they want to reach out to others. Now, I usually I'm speaking to the mourners, and I say to them, make a list of the people you want to call on any given day, and make yourself a Shiva. Make yourself a full day or whatever your own hours would be. If you want to sit down from 2 to 4 and 7 to 9 and make phone call after phone call, because that would be the time that people would be visiting you, then do that. And I think even those people who have a private a private funeral and not a Zoom, and a private Shiva, they do take advantage of the phone, and they call the cousins and the extended family, or the friends who are like family. And they find that very helpful. Now, I'm taking one step further from that, and I'm saying, if we know someone who had a loss, put in that call. The worst they can do is not pick up your call, and you leave a message. And you leave a message simply saying, I'm thinking of you. I know this would be the week of Shiva. I would love to, visit your Shiva house, and we can't do that today. So I'm thinking of you, and leave a message, and then they'll either call you back or not call you back. Some people, of course, write notes as well. I'm going to just mention the Zoom Shiva, which I've seen some people do and some people not do. And the Zoom Shiva for some families has been fantastic, because then their friends from overseas are showing up in their shiva and they wouldn't be able to otherwise. What I usually advise people in that sort of situation is, I say, if you have a Zoom shiva, make sure you control it well. So, you all know I mute you obsessively because otherwise nobody can hear each other. And in a Zoom shiva, people are in and people are out. And so, the Zoom settings need to be in a certain way that everyone is muted when they come in. And then, the person sitting shiva sometimes is playing like a MC, like, oh, so-and-so from Atlanta just came in, or my cousin from Israel is here. And then they're introducing each other just the way that it would happen in a shiva house. And some people really appreciate the opportunity to do that. I know one family who did Zoom shivas, but only by invitation. So they said, we're going to have a Zoom shiva tonight for all the extended cousins, and we're going to just send the link to them. And then the next day they said, we're doing the friends who grew up with me, who knew my mother, way back when. It's like I feel like I should write a book about this, like a guidebook to, God willing, we wouldn't need it anymore much longer. Yes, David, did that answer? I know, I feel like I went way off, but I hope that answered a little bit of it.
So the initiative has to come from the mourners, right?
I think the initiative has to come from the mourners in terms of whether they do a Zoom or a not Zoom or a phone or a not phone. However, I think putting in a phone call is never a bad thing. And that initiative, I think, could come from members in the community.
Thank you.
And I'm speaking to myself too, because there've been, funerals in our community that I may not be involved with. And then I feel shy, I'll be honest, I feel shy to call. I don't want to intrude, right? I don't want to impose. I don't know how they feel. And it's different than walking into a shiva and you kind of have a sense. And I think that's wrong. I think that's hard. It's harder, but it's just as important as ever to reach out. And I'm reminding myself to do that as well. I have one more thing that I wanted to play for all of you. So I'm wondering if we have time maybe for 2 more comments in the space. If anyone wants to raise their hand and tell me if you have something to say.
I have
Bunny and Farla, you're gonna be our 2, and then anyone else can type into the chat. Oops, I just tried to mute you, David, and I accidentally unmuted you. Ignore me. Okay.
I just have a problem with the extra guilt that Hamilton took into his grief. That the one secret that he didn't share with his wife, and all the openness was his responsibility for the son's dying. And I bring this also to wondering about the anger that parents will have. Why did he have to take him to that party on the mountain? So there's this extra anger,
the guilt
that you really even can't share with the person you need to share with the most. And to me, that's very, very hard. And I'm sitting with that.
Yes, and I think so. For those who are familiar with the Hamilton narrative, right, Alexander encouraged him not to go to the duel, but encouraged him, helped him out, and said, shoot to the sky. And I think that's why it's really important that we get to hear Alexander later saying, if I could, I would give my life for his. I would do anything. I never thought I was sending my son to his death. That was never my intention. God forbid. So I would trade his life for mine. That's what he says. And that would be enough. If I could, it would make you smile, right? He says it would make you smile, Eliza, and that would be enough. So yes, there's always a what if, and that's the survivor's guilt for anyone, by the way. I've seen it for people who have nursed their relative through sickness, and then the relative dies, and the person says, did I do enough? And they feel guilty. And it almost doesn't matter what the actual evidence is. that you may feel that way. Okay, last comment, and then we're going to play one last thing before we go. Farla.
Well, I just wanted to say that to write a personal note, like a real writing, which nobody does anymore, and to express your feelings is very meaningful. And
yes, thank you.
I wrote a note to somebody who had COVID and had recovered, and I sent this little card, and she sent back this note saying, oh my God, I was so surprised because nobody writes any.
Oh, I know, right?
How
Right.
meaningful it was. So I'm just.
Thank you for saying that. And the other bonus of that is that the person doesn't have to pick up the phone. They do it on their time. They open it, they read it, and everybody has their own pace and their own comfort.
You can say
And
more things in a note that you wouldn't be saying on the phone, So
thank you. So the last piece I'm going to play for you, and I encourage everyone to keep reading the chat if you can. It's interesting the way that this song, it's Quiet Uptown, was re-recorded by a popular singer, Kelly Clarkson, and she recorded it without any of the names. So she takes out the names of Hamilton and Eliza and anything specific, and it becomes a very universal song about suffering, about grief. And so I'll just play for you this video. And because of course Hamilton is it's pop songs, right? It's popular music. It so seamlessly becomes this song that you might hear on the radio. It's a sad song. But I would imagine, given the fact that this video I'm going to show you has 3.5, almost 4 million views, that it really has resonated for people, for anyone who has suffered or who's experienced loss during this time. So we're going to end on this, and you may love it or hate it. You may feel a little protective of the Hamilton musical to see this thing completely redone this way, but it's a ballad, right? It's a pop song that obviously people are connecting with. So here we go.
There are moments that the words don't reach. There is suffering too terrible to name. You hold your child as tight as you can and push away the unimaginable. The moments when you're in so deep, feels easier to just swim down. And so they move uptown and learn to live with the unimaginable. I spend hours in the garden. I walk alone to the store, and it's quiet uptown. I never liked the quiet before. I take the children to church on Sunday, a sign of the cross at the door. And I pray that never used to happen before. If you see him in the street, walking by himself, talking to himself, have pity. You knock me out, I fall apart. Look at where we are. Look at where we started. I know I don't deserve you, but hear me out, that would be enough. If I could spare his life, if I could trade his life for mine, he'd be standing here right now, and you would smile, and that would be enough. Don't you like it uptown? It's quiet uptown. They are standing in the garden, standing there side by side. She takes his hand. It's quiet uptown. Forgiveness. Can you imagine forgiveness? Can you imagine? No. Look around, look around. They are going through the unimaginable.
Sorry for all those ads there that pop up on YouTube at the end. So that ending of forgiveness really in a universal way. So we'll end on that. We'll end on forgiveness, reconciliation, making peace with what was. You know, that's the journey of grief that we all hope to achieve. But it starts with the quiet. And yeah, I found it beautiful as well. So
Thank you
thank
very
you
much.
so much
Well,
for
thank
coming
you.
on this journey with me today.